You know those images, right? Those grainy black and white photos. 9 kids, just teenagers, really, books in hand, facing a mob, screaming, ugly, soldiers having to escort them just to get into school, a school they had every right to attend. The Little Rock Nine. Powerful stuff. Today we're going to take a deep dive into their story. This was a turning point, a real turning point in the fight for civil rights.
It's easy to think of this as just one event, right? A moment frozen in time, but it's so much bigger than that. It's years of legal battles, it's political maneuvering, it's regular people showing incredible courage.
And we're going to start back in '54 with Brown v. Board of Education.
The landmark case. Huge. Segregation in schools unconstitutional. The law of the land. But then what?
Yeah, you can make a law, but how do you change an entire system? A system that's been in place for generations. And that's what we're going to see play out in Little Rock.
Just 3 years after Brown v. Board, Little Rock, Arkansas. It becomes ground zero in this fight.
So many different players, too, each with their own approach to this massive change.
Yeah, you've got Virgil Blossom, the Little Rock school superintendent.
Yeah.
Caught in the middle, trying to follow the law. But also, trying to keep things calm, minimize the pushback.
Trying to keep a lid on things. And then on the other side, you've got Daisy Bates, head of the NAACP in Little Rock. No compromise. Full steam ahead with integration, no matter what.
I mean, can you imagine the pressure she must have been under? Threats, intimidation. But she never backed down. She stood with those 9 students. Incredible strength.
Absolutely. And then you have Governor Orville Faubus, a real wild card in all of this.
A Southern Democrat. And from what our sources say, it seems like he saw this whole thing as a way to get ahead. Politically, I mean.
Yeah, he saw which way the wind was blowing, this whole civil rights movement gaining momentum, and he figured siding with the segregationists, well, that was a good move for his career.
It really makes you wonder, though, doesn't it? Was it all just a cynical move? Or did he believe what he was saying? Did he really think he was protecting the people of Arkansas? It's a tough one to answer.
So you've got all these forces colliding, these personalities clashing, and Little Rock becomes the stage, a national showdown. And what we're going to do is dig deeper, unpack everything that led up to that first day of school, September 4th, 1957. Because it wasn't just about emotions, there was strategy involved too, calculated moves on all sides, and a community on the verge of change, maybe even tearing itself apart.
One of our sources really goes into the weeds on Blossom's integration plan. It's fascinating. It wasn't just slow. It was like this really complex system, phased integration. They were going to start with just 1 grade.
Smart, right? Like dip their toes in the water.
Yeah. But people like Daisy Bates, they saw right through it. They said it was full of holes, ways to just delay real integration forever, basically.
It makes you think, huh? I mean, was Blossom really on board with Brown v. Board? Or was he just trying to play both sides? Keep everybody happy, which, you can't really do.
Exactly. And, it's interesting when you look at other cities in the South trying to do the same thing, desegregate the schools. Some of them tried that gradual approach, like in Norfolk, Virginia. But they had a lot of pressure from segregationists, a lot of pushback.
Yeah. So Little Rock wasn't unique in that way, but the level of resistance, that seems different. Like it went to another level.
And that's where Faubus comes in. He saw an opportunity. He realized this whole civil rights thing, it was a chance for him to make a name for himself.
Playing to the fears of white voters.
Absolutely. He starts giving these speeches, talking about chaos, saying their way of life was under attack, really inflammatory stuff.
Pouring gasoline on the fire.
And then he does something even crazier. The day before integration is supposed to start, he calls in the National Guard, says it's to keep the peace, maintain order. Come on. Everybody knew what he was really doing. He was stopping those black students from getting into Central Highs.
A direct challenge to the federal government, to the Supreme Court. I mean, it's a powder keg at this point.
And then, of course, you have that image, Elizabeth Eckford, one of the Little Rock Nine, trying to get to school, surrounded by this mob, screaming at her, spitting on her. The look on her face, pure terror. You can't forget that. It was everywhere. Newspapers, TV. It was a wake-up call for the country. This wasn't some abstract legal debate anymore. This was real. This was happening.
And even Eisenhower, who was, trying to stay out of it, he had to do something.
Right. I mean, the guy's a war hero. He doesn't want to send troops into an American city to fight American citizens. But what choice did he have? Faubus forced his hand.
It's really incredible. I mean, you have this huge legal victory, Brown v. Board. But to actually make it happen, to actually integrate the schools, it took kids like the Little Rock Nine and people like Daisy Bates putting their lives on the line. And even then, it took the president sending in the army.
It shows you right that sometimes laws aren't enough. You need people willing to fight for what's right, to take risks, and even then, it's a long, hard road.
And for the Little Rock Nine, that was just the beginning. Getting into Central High, that was just the first step. What they had to deal with inside those walls, that's a whole other story. Yeah, walking through those doors was one thing, but what about what happened after that? What was it like for them inside Central High?
Think about it. You're a teenager. High school's hard enough anyway,
Right.
all the social stuff, trying to fit in. But these kids, they had to deal with all that. Plus, they were facing hostility, isolation, threats every single day from the other students.
It's hard to even imagine. I mean, did any of the teachers try to help them, or were they on their own?
It sounds like it was mixed. Some teachers really did try to protect them, to make things a little easier, but others, they were part of the problem, openly hostile.
So with all of that going on, was it even possible for them to focus on their schoolwork, to succeed academically?
It's incredible that they managed to do anything at all academically. Some of them really did well, excelled even, but a lot of them struggled. And it wasn't because they weren't smart. It was the pressure, the constant harassment, the psychological toll it took.
And it wasn't just the students who suffered, right? What about their families?
Oh, absolutely. They were targeted too. Some of them lost their jobs, faced threats, had their homes vandalized. Can you imagine? Your kid just wants to go to school, and you end up losing everything. It's unbelievable the strength they showed. The whole families, just to get through it.
And even after all that, only Ernest Green, one of the original 9, graduated from Central High.
It's heartbreaking. The others had to transfer to different schools or finish through correspondence courses. It just shows you, right? Sometimes winning in court isn't enough. Brown v. Board was a huge step, but real change, real integration, that takes a lot more time, a lot more struggle.
It's a long road. We're still on that road today.
Exactly. And, we were talking earlier about how Faubus really made things worse, made the resistance stronger. What about the national picture? Did our sources talk about how the media covered this or what politicians were saying?
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't just happening in a vacuum. This was national news.
Right. And the way it was reported, well, that had impact. Some outlets, they were pushing for integration, talking about equality. But others, they were making things worse, playing on people's fears, making the students sound like the enemy.
So on top of everything else, these 9 kids, they're living through this really personal, really intense experience. And at the same time, it's being used by politicians, twisted by the media. It's like their story wasn't even their own anymore.
Yeah, there were all these other forces at play. National politics, media narratives, the country trying to figure out who it was, who it wanted to be.
And that brings us to the question that was in the notes for this deep dive. What if social media had existed in 1957? How would things have been different?
Interesting, right? Would it have made things better or worse? Would it have been like this echo chamber for hate? Or would people have rallied around the Little Rock Nine?
I mean, on the one hand, social media can spread awful things,
Right.
lies, hate. We see that all the time. But it can also connect people, build movements, bring attention to injustice.
It's hard to know for sure how it would have played out. Maybe it would have been both. A way to spread hate and a way to fight back against it. I mean, think about it. The Little Rock Nine, they were already going viral in a way through newspapers and TV, but social media, that's instant. It's global.
Those images, those stories, they would have been everywhere.
And there were powerful stories of courage, of kids standing up for their rights. Imagine that reaching millions of people instantly. Would it have changed people's minds, put more pressure on the government? Who knows? But it's interesting to think about.
It makes you think about how we understand history, too.
Right. We often talk about the Little Rock Nine as this victory, a win for civil rights. And it was, but it was also a really painful time, full of trauma. And the fight didn't end there. It's still going on today.
Exactly. The Little Rock Nine, they showed us that progress isn't easy. It's not a straight line. There are setbacks, there's resistance. And sometimes even when you win, you still have a long way to go.
But they kept going. They faced down a mob. They endured incredible pressure. They demanded their rights. And that's what we have to remember. We can't give up. The fight for equality continues.
And their story reminds us that it's a fight we all have to be a part of. It's not enough to just read about history. We have to learn from it. We have to apply those lessons to the world today.
So we're going to leave you with that thought. As we wrap up this deep dive into the story of the Little Rock Nine, take some time to learn more about them, about their individual stories, their struggles, their triumphs, their legacy. What they did took incredible courage. And it inspires us to keep fighting for a better world, for everyone.